Just living today because our physical Spiritist center is closed due to the coronavirus, but we will continue with our lectures on Sundays and Tuesdays. So now I will start with our reading. So the book is Our Daily Bread, the Spirit Emmanuel, the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier. Chapter 24, The Prodigal Children. And when he had come to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's servants have an abundance of bread, while I am here dying of hunger?" Luke 15:17. In examining the figure of the prodigal son, we all think of him as a rich man who wastes his material wealth on worldly pleasures. But this picture should be enlarged to entail different aspects. Prodigal children do not only live where there is an abundance of money. They come from all areas of a human activity and wander away from various positions. Great scientists waste their intelligence by spreading intellectual poisons that are unworthy of the conscience granted to them. Praiseworthy artists needlessly waste their imagination and sensibility on petty adventures and end up in debasement and crime. Everywhere we see these wastes of wealth, knowledge, time, health, and opportunity. When they see simple and humble people ascend toward God, imbued with real trust, they experience the great anguish of uselessness, and instead of enjoying inner peace, they exclaim downheartedly, "How many simple laborers hold the bread of inner serenity, whereas the hunger for peace torments my spirit." The world is repleted with prodigal children, and hour after hour, thousands of voices cry out like this one. Emmanuel. Dear God, our guardian angels, the spiritual benefactors of this home, conscious living, at this moment we ask for your protection, your inspiration to our dear friend Suzana, who will be delivering the lecture of today, showing us her studies so we can fully comprehend, we can benefit from it, from our homes, and continue our improvement in spirituality, in love, in forgiveness, in care for the others and for ourselves. So, Master Jesus, at this time, we are here giving ourselves to you and opening our hearts and minds to be able to understand this message that you have been giving to us over 2,000 years. Thank you so much. So be it.
So good morning, everyone who is watching us online today, because I have two incarnate here with me this morning. We wish everyone who is watching peace and calmness in these times of great trials for our humanity. May we all take the time to really think about what is the spiritual meaning of this crisis that we are facing, and moving forward, how can each one of us do better in preserving the health of our planet and our own health. And today we are talking about health because we're talking about depression. And depression has become an epidemic concern and issue on our society. It has been identified as a second place. It is in the second place of psychiatric disorders, only behind anxiety. Anxiety being the number one psychiatric disorder in our world. And also it is second place in the disorders that affect people's quality of life, being second only to cardiac disease. So it is a pretty significant problem that we face today, and one that is so broad and has such a place in our society that it became, in a way, part of our daily life. So people, we may wake up one day feeling a little down, and we tend to label that state of sadness or whatever is as depression. So I'm a little depressed, people say very often, without really realizing what they're saying and what depression truly means. So we're going to look at the meaning of depression. So what is depression? Depression is not sadness. Depression is actually a mood disorder. It's actually a syndrome with many different aspects to it that affects the physical body. So it actually alters the chemistry of our brain, and also alters how one senses and sees life and values life. So it is a disorder that affects human beings as a whole, compromising the physical body, compromising one's mood, and also compromising one's thinking, one's cognitive ability. So as we can see, it is much more complex than just simply the emotion of sadness that we commonly experience. Now, there are different types of depression. So not always when we are talking about depression, we are thinking about what is well known as major depressions. So major depressions are that state where the individual often is unable to function. But not all depressions manifest in the same way, and there are different degrees for depression and different ways in which depression can manifest itself. So I put just a few ones here, a few examples. So we have bipolar disorders, which are a mood disorder, where you have these alternate state of depression and mania. You have seasonal affective disorders, where the disorder of depression is going to manifest in specific seasons, usually during times where there is no sunlight and people are deprived from vitamin D, for instance. You have postpartum depression. We work with the elderly. We see a lot of senile depression is not there. You have major and minor depressions. You have dysthymia, which is mild depression that undergoes for a minimum of 2 years. And it is that individual that when you talk to him or to her, they're constantly looking at life in a negative way. They have a very pessimistic approach to anything and everything, no matter how things are presented, no matter what the circumstances are. Beyond that, we have the symptoms of depression and how depression is actually diagnosed. And this is important so that we don't diagnose ourselves as being depressed when we have perhaps one or two symptoms of depression. Actually, for the diagnosis of depression, usually 5 of those symptoms need to be present in order to classify as a disorder. So the symptoms for depression are persistent sadness. So it's not that type of sadness that you wake up one day feeling a little down, you go to work, your mind is already engaged in different things and you're no longer sad. No, it tends to persist. People have lack of interest in activities that normally were interesting to them. There is a change in body weight. It can be excessive gain of weight or excessive loss of weight, agitation or lethargy, fatigue. People commonly experience significant loss of energy, feelings like uselessness or inadequacy, guilt, incapacity of concentration, difficulty making decisions. That is when the cognitive part is also affected. And very often thoughts around death and all the way to suicidal ideation. So these are some of the symptoms that we see in people who are depressed. And depression can also be the underlying cause for many physical manifestations. So a lot of times depression can be misdiagnosed when you go to the doctor and you are feeling gastric problems or cardiac problems, but underlying the disorders that are being manifested in the physical body is depression. So people are treated by the physical symptoms, and a lot of times the depression is not captured. So moving forward, what are the feelings present? How do people feel usually when they are depressed? So Edith Sinoche, who is a psychologist and a spiritist, she says that depression is a very painful, subjective experience that's almost impossible to be described. And she says that the person experiences the loss of something that is profoundly meaningful to him or to her. And there are two very significant feelings that are present in a person who is depressed and who I would like to highlight, because at the very end, we're going to get back to them. And the feelings are of powerlessness and hopelessness. So powerlessness, the person feels completely unable to solve the situation. He or she has no power over what is happening to him or to her. And hopelessness, there is no solution in sight. There is no hope whatsoever for the situation to change or for things to have a better ending. Now, in the realm of feelings, it's important to understand that depression is not only sadness. So depression is experienced by men and women, for example, in different ways, not always in the same way. Why? Because, for example, in a very male-driven society, it is not okay for men to be sad. And men believes that they have to be self-sufficient, they have to be the providers, and so the depression might manifest in those individuals, if that is their belief system, in different ways. They might be irritable, they might be angry, but not necessarily they will be feeling sadness. So it's important to understand that although sadness is often very present in depression, not all depression is characterized by the feeling of sadness. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sadness. And I want to talk a little bit about sadness and spend a good amount of time in our lecture talking about sadness. Why? Because it's commonly found, it's a common symptom that we find in depression. And a lot of times, as I said, in our society that has a very, very difficult time in dealing with emotions. We started to go after pills and medications to treat sadness as if we were depressed. So it's important to understand what is the difference between the emotion that we call sadness and the disorder that's called depression. Also, I believe that the ability to process, to be with our sadness, as well as the ability to be with any emotions that we have, is the best primary prevention, not only for depression, but also for any kind of psychiatric disorders. Because psychiatric disorders are disorders that the main source is the spirit, and how the spirit feels is disorders that their main source is in the realm of emotions, is in the realm of feelings, and how we are able or unable to process these feelings. So I like to think that sadness lives in the lobby of the apartment where depression resides, is at the entrance. So let's look at sadness a little bit. And we're going to start with this statement by the Spirit Jesus da Cruz, when he says that emotions are the natural thermometer of organic, psychic, and spiritual boiling that takes place in nature. They represent deeper movements within the soul. They signal feelings they harbor in the heart. So this is a really wonderful definition by Jesus da Cruz through the mediumship of André Moreira, for two reasons. One, he is talking that emotions are messengers. Messengers, or as he says, a thermometer. It's measuring the temperature of our inner world, of what's happening deep inside our physical body, our psychic, and our spirit. And so emotions are different. He's making a difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are at the surface, so they are the messengers. And feelings, they're actually deep inside, they are structural. So emotions are messengers of our feelings. When we feel an emotion, and sadness is an emotion, it is telling us that there are feelings within us that need to be understood and need to be processed. So emotions, they come and go as messengers, like I said, and feelings are part of our inner structure. So if we understand it this way, then what happens is when emotions pop up in our daily lives, we need to welcome them. We need to open our homes for them. We need to pull a chair for them to sit. We need to prepare some coffee and sit with them and actually start a conversation. But that's not usually what we like to do, because we tend to label our emotions, and some of them are excellent and welcome, and some of them are not desired. So we have emotions that we think are uncool, and also we are very unskilled in dealing with these emotions. So that's some of the challenges that we face when we are looking at our emotions. Those two big challenges. So we're going to look at them one by one. So when we are talking about emotions that are uncool, and sadness is one of them, this is something by Joana de Angelis. She says that there is today in our society an obligation of joy. It is intense, the stimulus for external achievements. For certain appearances, they're often empty of real meaning and do not fulfill life's goals. As a result, there is an attempt to hide feelings and emotions, conflicts and suffering. Many depressed individuals make an effort to maintain their routines, faking a state of happiness and keeping an indifferent attitude in regard to the inner world. In other words, we live in a society today that's pretty much all about appearance. And I have said this in other lectures, and I repeat here. When you open your Facebook page, the impression that you have is that the entire world, without exception, is living in a state of bliss. And we have lost the ability, and we have found shame in being humans, in being frail, in speaking about our vulnerabilities, in allowing sadness to be a natural part of our lives, of our existence. So there is this obligation of joy, obligation of happiness, as if life is a constant state of happiness, as if there is no place for us to feel sad, to feel human, to feel vulnerable. And what happens is this excessive search and pressure for being happy 100% of the time ends up stressing us and ends up bringing states of fatigue and true deprivation of energy and creating the environment for many of these disorders to actually take place. But we are also unskilled to deal with sadness. So let's think about this for a second. When someone comes to the Spiritist Center and that person walks in, and think about you welcoming that person, and you immediately notice that there is a profound sadness on the person's face. What is your reaction to that? What would you say to that person? Hi, how are you? Oh, I see you look a little sad to me. Let's just do a prayer together. Come on, things are gonna get better very soon, right? Why don't you just put a smile on and, just change your thinking. Start thinking about good things and help the sadness to go away, right? So it's a natural human tendency to find ways that we can help that person to get rid of the sadness sooner than later. If we're just a little bit more skilled, we would say to the person, oh, I see you sad. Would you like to talk about it? And you pull the person to the side and say, why don't you share with me a little bit of what is going on with you? And the person might start talking a little bit. But then what happens is, a lot of times we get so uncomfortable with the person's sadness, the person starts to cry and is having a difficult time. So we must say something. And a lot of times, unable to sit with the discomfort of somebody else, we start to report our own experiences. We throw our own experiences into the conversation. And if we don't have our own experiences, we think of the experience of our neighbor, and we bring our neighbor into the conversation. A lot of times, because we're just having a very, very difficult time sitting with that sadness and doing what is the most effective thing to do in that moment, to listen. And say very little. Sometimes say nothing. Just listen and give that person a hug. Well, today you wouldn't give a hug. You would give an energetic hug. But you know what I mean. So we have a very difficult time with sadness, and we have historically associated sadness to weakness, and have given it a very negative connotation. Now, what is interesting is that Joana de Angelis, she's going to, I guess I didn't put this on the slide. Joana de Angelis is going to tell us the sadness is part of a healthy menu. Sadness is a necessary nutrient for a healthy menu. So we need to understand that in order to be happy and in order to be healthy, we need to be able to be sad. We need to be able to embrace sadness in our lives. Okay, I'm sorry about this. Okay, so moving forward, she's going to say that sadness is actually a pause. is a pause for inner work. It's a transitory state that opens a space for reflection and awakening without complaints and resentment. So sadness is a pause. When we are sad, life is telling us, pause for a moment. This is transitory. This is going to pass. But take this time, open a space within you to reflect and to awaken to what life is trying to tell you without complaints and without resentment. Because complaints and resentment, they get into the way of us doing the work that we need to do. The Spirit Jesus da Cruz will recommend, listen to the message generated on the sacred soil of your body at the service of your soul. So listen to the message generated on the sacred soil of your body at the service of your soul. And how do we do that? So when the emotion, we're talking about sadness, but again, it could be any other emotion, pops up on the surface of our body and becomes conscious, we need to ask questions without judgment. We need to say to ourselves, I am angry. I am sad. And for that to be just that, no good, no bad associated to it. And then the next question is, what is the meaning of this emotion? What feeling is behind this emotion? So a lot of times, for example, when we are angry, which is an emotion, what are the feelings? The feelings is that, well, that person didn't treat me the way that I wanted. And the feeling is that I'm not being respected. The feeling is that I'm not being seen. The feeling is that I'm not being valued. Oh, I'm feeling all those things. What does that tell about me? It tells me that perhaps I need to value myself a little bit more, because I cannot rely on others to tell me what my value is. Oh, I'm not seen, right? So what does that mean? That means that you need to see yourself. Because if you're unable to see your own self, right, to acknowledge your own self, no one will. So this is how we can use emotions. They are transitory, they are messengers to tap into our feelings, deep into our souls. Andre Moreira, in a lecture that he does about the topic, I really love this idea. He talks about emotions being like rivers that must flow, bringing life to the pathway that they run. And when we block our emotions, we create problems. We're going to have an overflood in one side, or we're going to have a drought on the other side of the barrier that we create. But in whatever way you want to look at it, we are creating a significant amount of problems by not addressing our emotions. So what are we supposed to do with our emotions? We're supposed to cultivate as a primary prevention to our emotional disorders. And what does the cultivation of our emotions entail? We need to look at our emotions as little flowers in our garden. So as a gardener, what is it that you do when you see something happening to that particular plant? You might have to trim, you might have to remove the things that no longer are serving that plant and in fact are draining good energy from the plant. Same thing we have to do with ourselves. All the feelings that have been unresolved, but we continue to carry within ourselves, they are draining our best energies. So we need to attend to them. Trimming. Trimming is getting rid of what no longer serves us, transforming, transcending. But we have to nurture whatever is left. We might need to repot that plant. We might need to place things in a different soil. So we need to take care of our emotions as a gardener does to a plant, to a flower, to a tree, to his or to her yard, so that that emotion can flourish into something positive, into a learning, into a new experience, and ultimately into light in our lives. Okay, so this was just a brief thing about sadness, and let's go back to depression. Now looking into the causes of depression. So in the causes of depression, we have physical components. So we have the genetics, although scientists, it is my understanding, have yet to locate a specific gene for sadness. What we know is when you were born in a family where there is a history of depression or even a history of different psychiatric disorders, you are much more propense to develop depression. And it's also known that this factor alone is not enough to determine that a person is going to have depression. And studies done with twins show that only 40% of them will develop, both of them will develop depression. So there are other factors, but genetics is something to take into consideration. On the organic realm, we measure the chemistry imbalance in our brain. So we know that the brain have neurotransmitters and that they're responsible for an array of feelings and many different things in our physical body. And in depression, serotonin particularly is usually found in lower amounts. So we also know that this chemical imbalance is part of what we see in depression. But we also have emotional and spiritual factors, which are the ones that we will zoom in a little bit right now. So when it comes to emotional and spiritual factors, we are going to take into consideration the role of the past. And when we are talking about the role of the past, we can think about it in two different ways. Our past lives, so many of us will reincarnate with a history of depression and other disorders, or with a history of certain behaviors that we've had in many different lives that will continue in the present life. So our past experiences will play a role in what we experience and how we live in the present moment. So there is a component that comes from our past lives. But also we can think about the past as our past within this incarnation. So our youth, our childhood, and all the experiences that we have had and that have not been fully processed by us. So we can think about these experiences again from our present incarnation, past years, or we can think about experience from past lives. The reality is that whether we are talking about this lifetime or a previous lifetime, anything that is not fully processed remains with us. And what happens is, as we go through life challenges, as we go through different situations, those situations will trigger a lot of times feelings, emotions that are stored in our unconscious, waiting for the moment to be attended to be resolved and to be transcended. So the past, as I say here, will emerge. And a lot of times when we have been accumulating many experiences without being adequately processed. So let's say, for example, losses. Losses are a natural part of our lives. Everybody loses something at some point. And it's an important phenomenon because it tells us, it teaches us about what is truly essential. And it talks about the need of movement in life. of always being moving into new experiences. So loss is part of our lives, but if you don't process the loss of a person or anything, and then another event come, another loss come, and that's also not processed, then it might come a day where you lose something that might be even less significant than the other losses, but then you go into that state of unbearable grief. And the unbearable grief is because you're not only grieving the present moment, in the present moment you're grieving that particular loss and all the losses from the past that were not appropriately grieved. And therefore it opens the space for depression to take place because of overwhelming grief not appropriately processed. And we also have the present moment. We have the present moment where many times we are going to be dealing with the natural challenges of life. So this is an important concept. Life is not a vacation, as we have been saying. It has challenges, it has trials, and they are there for a reason. They are there to help us to grow spiritually. But a lot of times we are unprepared to deal with life challenges. We are disconnected from life's real meaning. We are in a place of non-acceptance of God's will, rebelliousness, which is a common characteristic of our humanity. We want things done our way and not God's way, although you pray differently, but at the end of the day, we really would like for life to go our way. And there is the presence of spiritual influences that can be either starting the depressive process or enhancing the depressive process once we have it started. But Joana de Angelis, in speaking about those factors, she will say, the incarnate spirit finds in itself his entire evolutionary history, with its achievements and mistakes calling for attention. The most serious conflicts from the past are responsible for the installation of brain disturbances, triggering the depressive process. Even if we consider the hereditary process and the exogenous causes of depression, it is the spirit always the one pulling the trigger of the process. It is therefore the spirit's responsibility to revert the situation. We're going to pause here and think about this for a little bit. So yes, it's true that we bring our entire history within ourselves, and this is the purpose of life. I mean, is to look at where we are and understand who we are, and understand our past, because the past is manifesting every moment in the present. So by looking at the present, being curious about yourself in the present moment, you can pay attention to the past and attend to the past. Now, when the spirit brings from the past a mind that is very disturbed, and there's nothing that disturbs the mind more than the feeling of guilt, then the spirit in the reincarnation process, as it attaches to the new body, it will affect the formation of the new body, and the body will bring the predisposition for a certain disorder, a certain disease. That is how, in a lot of people, at a certain age, that mechanism is triggered by life, but it was present in the spirit from the beginning. It is again the spirit who is going to imprint in that new body the effects of its disorganization. They are going to be mirrored in the physical body, and at some point that depression, that chemistry disorder takes place in the physical body and will manifest in the form of depression. But what she's saying is that even if you consider that Even if you consider any circumstantial, exogenous, outside causes of depression, at the very core of the disorder is always the spirit. And why is this so important? Because if it is the spirit, the core and the beginning of all the process, no matter how many elements you bring to the process, it's also in the spirit the power to change, the power to heal, and the power to transform his or her own situation. So this goes when I said in the very beginning of the talk that the primary feeling of the person who is in depression is powerlessness and hopelessness. Here is where we're going to start talking about where is the power and where do we find the hope for the healing of depression. So we're going to find, I want to bring another aspect. So sometimes the spirit is going to, the disturbance is so prevalent, the disorganization of the mind is so prevalent, the feelings of guilt are so deep that the manifestation of the disorder is going to happen no matter what. It's part of that reincarnatory process. It is unavoidable. It's necessary for the healing of the spirit per se. But not always is like that. So a lot of times we have in our DNAs, in our genes, this is where our past inheritance is present in the form of predispositions and tendencies. So although we have been we are tied to our past deeds, we are not completely at the mercy of the past. There's actually power and possibilities in the present moment. And these I want to touch very briefly in the concept of epigenetics. So we know that, different than before, that only 5% of our genes are constantly activated. 95% of the genes need to be activated. By whom? By the spirit. So when we think about epigenetics in a very simple explanation, and this we find in before science, Andrew Lewis tells us about it in the book Evolution in Two Worlds. He's going to say that in the DNA is within the nucleus of the cell, is where the orders are sent to the cytoplasm. So the DNA, the genes in the nucleus of the cell send certain orders to the cytoplasm, and in the cytoplasm, which is where the factory of the cell is, certain proteins, certain things will be built from that order that came from the office of the president, let's put it this way, which is the DNA, the gene in the nucleus. Now, we also know that in our blood, we have certain molecules, they're running in between the cells. The cells have a membrane, and the membrane has little gates. The gates are proteins and different other organelles. That these molecules, they're running in the blood, they can connect to these gates, and they can send signals inside the cells to activate or deactivate certain genes. This is how the spirit can command its own body and its cellular world. So the spirit is the one who is actually sending the command to the cellular world, and the cells will take those orders, will bind to the membranes of the cells, and will tell the cells activate or don't activate, turn on or turn off certain genes, and therefore certain effects. And so with this idea, what we are looking at is the understanding that the power of genetics is relative. So even if I, spirit, had a past, a compromised past, and I mark my physical body with certain predispositions from the past, certain tendencies, it is within my power in the present moment to add some colors, some different shades to this picture. I am empowered to turn on, to turn off, to make things happen or not make things happen. So this theory restitutes the power to the spirit. So we are no longer in any way, shape, or form that we look at this situation victims, powerlessness, hopelessness. There is always hope, because you who are struggling, you who are suffering, you are in the command of your life, and you have the power to change everything, to change your days, to change your experience, to change the way you perceive life, to add a new meaning to your life, to your own struggles, to your daily experiences, therefore changing the entire circumstance that you are living in. So like I said, the mind will imprint on the physical body its own colors. The mind is also a gate. We did mention the obsessive process. So, and we did talk about obsession being a cause, can be something that triggers the process or an aggravating factor. But I love this sentence here. I love this sentence here. The obsessor is not someone who invaded your home. He's always a guest. So, in this sentence, there is also power. Power to you who seek the spiritual center or who is home convinced that you are under an obsessive process. And there is no hope because you are a victim of this spirit. He did not break the lock of your house and enter without your permission. He is someone who you have embraced in your mind, in your psychic. Therefore, it's also within your power to say, enough for now. I am closing my door and I'm going to move forward, choosing different companies for myself. So, in finalizing, the power is in the present moment. Everything that we have lived, all the experiences, all the mistakes, they are there for us to find new meanings and to learn from them. We shouldn't be enslaved by them. We shouldn't crucify ourselves because of them. The present moment allows us to get in touch with them and give everything that we have experienced a new meaning. In the present moment, spiritually speaking, what the spirits meant to Joana de Angelis in particular tell us is depression is very much tied up with dissatisfaction with oneself. Conflicts born from desires not attended, frustrations, guilt are at the root of depression. The depressed person suffers from inability to accept life as it is. It encloses itself in a movement of withdrawal from life. If I cannot have it my way, then will be no way. In other words, it is a movement of rebelliousness. I want things to be, think of a 2-year-old having a tantrum and throwing himself or herself on the floor. So when we experience these states of depression, spiritually speaking, in addition to everything else that we have said, it is a spirit who says, I wish life was this way, but God gave me that way. I refuse to play the game. I refuse to play the game, and I'm going to play the game of victim, and I'm going to believe deep inside that there is no solution for my case. And then the person withdraws from life. What is the treatment then for depression? The treatment is definitely medication. We did speak about an imbalance of the brain that needs to be addressed. Who are the worst patients out there? Spiritists, who believe that everything can be fixed with a prayer. Yes, a lot of things can be fixed with a prayer. But a lot of times we don't seek the medical care in a position of omnipotence and pride, thinking that we can solve everything by ourselves and not recognizing the importance of seeking help. Everybody needs help. We all need help one time or another. Psychotherapy is important because a lot of times so many are the issues unresolved, so difficult for us to access them, that a good psychotherapist will help you to get in touch with these feelings in a way where you will feel supported, in a way where you feel like, although you are dealing with very difficult feelings, you have someone who is holding you, guiding you, helping you through the process. So no matter how dismantled you feel that someone is there for you. That's the role of a very good psychotherapist in our lives. Know thyself. So having the courage to do this work that we were talking about, understanding that being mindful of our emotions and not killing the messengers. We tend to kill the messengers. Oh, you were sad, you know what? Let's go to this really new restaurant that just opened and have a wonderful meal. I'm sure with a good hot plate of pasta, this sadness is going to go away. You're killing the messenger, right? So, or let's go for a drink. Let's go for a happy hour. Everything will be better. You're killing the messenger, right? So self-knowledge requires the courage and the strength to sit with the emotion and to have that conversation with the emotion. The Spiritist therapy I put different than the gospel therapists, although they are intertwined. But I think the Spiritist therapist talks about enhancing for us what is the meaning of life, right? So understanding that life is posed to us as a journey, as a time where we come here to learn. We're here to learn lessons that will grant us happiness today and tomorrow. So life is not a holiday, a continuous, ride of joy. No, it has challenges, it has difficulties, but these difficulties are working in your favor, are working to promote your spirit. So understanding and really studying and really seeking to broaden the meaning of life is extremely important in the fight against depression. The gospel therapy is about investing, is that repotting of the plant and adding some nutrients to the plant. So we need to add the values of the gospel, of compassion, of self-love, of patience, of tolerance, of forgiveness, and investing on those feelings so that our inner life can become this. No matter what circumstances of life we experience, we always have our personal garden inside, our own flowers to smell, to look at, to appreciate, and the experience ultimately that we don't lose sight, we don't lose connection with the experience of God always present in our lives, outside or within us. So I hope this reflection, it's very difficult to talk about depression in such a short period of time, but we attempted to touch in as many points as possible. And I would say for you who might be experiencing depression, don't give up. There is hope. There is help out there for anyone who experienced this. I know that it's very difficult when you are deep in a hole to understand or even to hear that life is beautiful, but there is beauty in life and there is hope and you are light. Just remember that always. You might not be shining at this moment, but your essence is one of light. And if you decide to seek for help, help will be there for you. So God bless everyone, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzana. Very important message, very powerful in times of epidemics of coronavirus, the epidemics of depression is another one that's extremely difficult. So we need all the love and light possible. So at this moment, we are going to do our final prayer. And please imagine this prayer will be also your passy in your home. And at the end, I just want to give one announcement, so please stay with us. Dear God, thank you so much for the blessing of being here, listening, another beautiful lecture, a beautiful message of hope to all our hearts who are feeling sad, depressed, so many problems in this beautiful blue planet. But this message gives us hope, helps us to understand there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And in this time of coronavirus, we want to send a powerful message to all our brothers and sisters, wherever they are. At this moment, we want to ask our guardian angels, we want to ask the elevated spirits, our Master Jesus, God, to envelop all of us with your love, with your light, bringing these positive energies to our physical bodies, to all the physical environments, whereas there are really sick people needing your help, needing this benefit, understanding that the collective prayer helps to spread this beautiful, healthy energy to all of us. And we ask you to shed your light in our homes, in all the hospitals, in all these beautiful countries, all the population that at this moment more than ever needs this love, needs this positive energy, and needs this feeling of a hope, understanding life is beautiful, this planet is beautiful, and difficulties are normal, but especially when we have faith, hope, and we work together, the difficulties shall pass. So, Master Jesus, please stay with all of us. Send this energy to all the countries at war, to the countries that have terrible epidemics, to all the other countries in this planet, to all of us that need you more than ever. Thank you so much, and so be it. So, my friends, at this time, we sincerely hope, can you turn on the light, please? We sincerely hope you appreciate this beautiful lecture, that you can stay with us in the following lectures we will have. But we want to ask you something extremely important. At this crisis time where we all need to be our homes for the safety of the population in general, we need to think that our center will have to continue paying their debts. We have to continue paying our bills. So at this moment, more than ever, it's very important that you can contribute. You can help us. You can make your donation so we can make amends. We can pay our bills. So please go to our webpage, get the information how to help us. You can go to PayPal. You can make donations, so we will be able to continue paying our rent even without your physical presence here, but your spiritual presence is always, always very important for all of us. Thank you so much, and we see you soon.